It's been quite a year talking about iPhones, about what decisions are the right ones and what decisions are the wrong ones. But at the same time, it is absolutely fascinating to see where it all began. So yeah, this is not a conventional video. Usually I'm talking about news or I'm reviewing a current product, but due to popular demand and due to the fact that a very, very gracious fan who's not giving me this, he is offering this as a review video. Also, I can take some Instagram pictures with it and then send it back to him. So I'm not keeping this device, but he sent it to me hoping that I could make a video about it, explaining my thoughts and my opinions on this original iPhone 2G, which of course is 10 years old now, and putting it next to the iPhone 10 is the best way to look at how iPhones have changed over the next decade. It's a 10-year anniversary, so it's kind of an interesting point in history to say how far has technology gone in the past 10 years in terms of the iPhone lineup. And also, it's just been a very curious subject for me because I have never seen one of these in my life. When this iPhone was first unveiled, I was 9 years old, and I knew no one who owned one. I never looked at one. I didn't even go to Apple stores back then because I don't even think at that age I was following any kind of technology news. I knew computers had games on them. That was about it. The first iPhone I ever saw someone use was an iPhone 3G, which a friend of my father's had, and I thought it was interesting. I was not an Apple sheep at the time. I just kind of liked Apple computers, but this was always like the untouchable, most expensive device that my parents always said, "You'll never be able to afford that. Don't even try." Look at where I am now, Mom and Dad. Look at this. And then, of course, I started following technology back when the iPhone 4 had a bunch of leaks and rumors going around for it, and you can assume what went on from there. But the original iPhone, never seen it, never used one, and now that I finally have it, it's so fascinating to see how a device that's 10 years old is still fairly functioning. By functioning, I mean the touchscreen is still working and the camera can still take pictures. Things that are definitely not functioning on it anymore are, for one, the App Store, the iTunes Store, things you cannot access. Ironically though, Safari still works, and if you watch my latest live stream that we had yesterday, I made the mistake of assuming you guys wouldn't do it, but I said, if someone donates a certain amount in Super Chat, then I will use this as my daily driver for 3 days. And I kind of said it as a joke, kind of at the last minute, and then a guy named Brandon did it, and I was like, oh god. So this is the end of the first day with the iPhone 2G, and via Safari, I can very, very lightly browse through Twitter. There's little leaks in there, it tells you who's tweeting them, but you can't see pictures, although you can see how long ago they were, and you just gotta get basic headlines and stuff. Apple.com does load, but again, no pictures, and my god, this is terrible. To go from an iPhone 10 to a 2G, I cannot wait for Thursday to be over and I can finally go back to my iPhone 10. And there's even some people online that have been saying that if I jailbreak the device with a certain OS, with certain version of iTunes, I am capable of getting this device to actually work with a SIM card, but jailbreaking the device and downgrading it to version iOS 1.0 and making all that happen, I think is a bit of a hassle because, first of all, it's not my device. I'll be mailing this back to its rightful owner after I'm done making the video about it, after I'm done taking pictures with it, and of course after I'm done with this challenge, which I stupidly agreed to. But these things are definitely getting increasingly rare, and I'm very, very grateful that there are fans out there who collect these just for the fun of it, because there's definitely really no functionality between it. Some things you take for granted in a smartphone. For one, front-facing camera. You know, ever since I've been interested in technology, basically every smartphone has a front-facing camera and a rear-facing camera. So obviously when I first started booting this up, I opened the camera app opens up, and I'm like, oh, how do I flip it around? And then I realized, oh no, it doesn't do that. So then I did what I do with my regular phones if I'm taking a portrait mode shot with the dual camera setup, because those portrait shots typically look better. I would take my iPhone 10 and I would open the camera in portrait mode on it, and then I would point it at myself, and then when I would click the volume button, it would of course take the picture, and then I could look at it, and usually the portrait mode does a pretty good job. Quickly, I discovered that if I try to do that on the original iPhone, the volume actually does not take a picture, which I actually don't remember when that was not an option, because you want to be opening the camera app and still changing your volume for some reason. Something you take for granted and don't think about. So the only way to take a picture of yourself with the iPhone 2G was to open the camera app, turn the device around, and hover your finger over the camera button and hope that you press it right. Now, I'm sure most of you older viewers are probably used to that, but to me anyways, it's not really something you think about. The other thing I totally don't really notice anymore is that 30-pin connectors used to exist. I didn't have a single 30-pin cable in my life, and luckily the fan who sent me this included one. on, so I had a way of charging it. But yeah, non-reversible. However, I did notice the charge time on this thing not being half bad, but I think that's because the battery is so incredibly small. Back in this version of iOS, you could not change your wallpaper. It had to be black. The thing you could change, though, was your lock screen wallpaper. That you could alter in the settings, but after sliding to unlock, nope, just black in the background, and that's all you get. Back in these days, we had the original YouTube app, one that was not paired through Google. It meant that just like Twitter, you simply had a YouTube account. It was not a Gmail, it was not a Google account, it was not tied to Google+. You simply had, by default, a stock app on your iOS that was just YouTube, and you would just sign into it, and that was it. I kind of miss those days, to be honest. Shockingly, the stock app still works, as does the weather app, and I've been taking a few pictures on it, and I gotta say, my girlfriend, at least, seems to think that it's not half bad. I definitely think of it as, well, that probably was great 10 years ago, but now it's like, don't use it, but hey, you can see the photo. I mean, that's pretty good, right? Not to mention, taking these pictures and putting them in this video was very difficult to do. You had to do the old-fashioned way and plug it in. One thing I found odd is that, while yes, it does have a headphone jack, but that doesn't bother me. That was common back then, is that the jack itself is within an even larger hole, so it was kind of designed for even wider headphone jack cables, opposed to regular headphone jack ports, like on the iPhone 5 or 4. And I'm not sure why they needed that to be so gaping large, but hey, it's still there. Being accustomed to this form factor has also definitely been a change in my life. When you're so used to your iPhone 10, and you've got this 5.8-inch display where you're used to reaching your thumb to the top of the screen, to the bottom of the screen as much as possible, then switching back to this, where I literally don't have to readjust anything. In fact, literally reaching my thumb all the way up reaches the power button, and then all the way down reaches the home button. Just a very simple amount of ergonomics that I could tell Steve Jobs was a fan of. With this 3.5-inch display, non-retina, you can easily see every single pixel. And yet at the same time, you gotta admit, for a lot of iPhones people already have, not a terrible amount has changed in terms of form factor and look. Only recently with the iPhone 10 are we finally breaking this mold of bottom bezel with home button, top bezel with earpiece. And I have to say, I'm predicting that in the next 10 years, design is not going to be as drastic as it is now. We can remove bezels on the 10, we can remove the notch, but still it's going to look basically the same with slight enhancements. But I think the massive changes we see with the original iPhone all the way up to the iPhone 10 is going to be the most white and dark noticeable changes in the smartphone lineup. I think we've experienced kind of the golden age of enhancements where every single year you're getting new products with new designs, new ideas, and I'm predicting we're kind of on the downhill slope of that. We're gonna get new stuff, we're gonna get better stuff, but in 10 years, will that iPhone make the iPhone 10 feel like this device? Perhaps in certain aspects, but maybe not this drastic. Anyway, I wanted to thank the anonymous fan who sent this to me, and I'll be sending it back to you very shortly after I complete this very hard challenge. And of course, I want to know your thoughts on the iPhone 2G. Was this kind of the first smartphone that started it all, or was this a ripoff of other companies' approach to modern tech that Steve Jobs stole? Personally, I don't get why people buy these and save them up like they're some kind of collectible. It's like, it's not a good phone. I mean, Steve Jobs himself is always like, in our industry, your art is not admired for centuries to come. It's more like a sediment of rock on a mountain. And I would definitely look at this as one of those sediments of rock. It's like, wow, this shows how obsolete things can get after 10 years, given that it's practically unusable now. But a long time ago, changed the world, and people were super psyched about it, and I think it's safe to say that if this product was never released, we'd be living in a very different world. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I will see you in the next one.